Are you tired of dealing with chronic inflammation? Do you want to learn how to reduce risk of health problems such as heart disease and cancer? Stay tuned to find out the top tips for reducing inflammation in the body and improving your overall health. Inflammation is this double-edged sword, right? Like, it's absolutely necessary for helping the immune system battle infection and for helping your body repair from injury. Inflammation is kind of this calling signal in our body to be like, hey, over here, we need some assistance. But whenever that is prolonged, whenever that becomes chronic, then not good things begin to happen. I'm well aware of this because on my journey to become, long jump champion, a long jump Olympic medalist, I dealt with inflammation a lot, right? Inflammation is a part of the repair process from exercise, from injury. You had to do a lot of training, a lot of days where you felt sore, you felt tired, right? Being sore and tired is kind of a part of being an elite athlete, honestly. Like, you're always doing rehab for a reason. It's because you created some inflammation in the body from the amount of work that you've been doing, and you're always trying to nap somewhere because you expend a lot of energy trying to achieve these goals. I understood that intense bouts of exercise created inflammation as a part of the body's recovery process, and there were telltale signs that I was chronically inflamed. Signs such as chronic fatigue, difficulty digesting and processing food, overall soreness, especially in my Achilles. I can remember having my Achilles tendonitis, and it was very prolonged, but at the time I just thought it was because of the amount of work that I was doing. I was doing good work, I was getting it in. I'm sore. I feel sore because I've been doing a lot of good work, when really that wasn't the case. I can remember getting out of bed and being like, it was like I was 77 and like walking real stiff. Once I got warm, my Achilles felt better. But then whenever I would have to go to the track and do my warm-up took extra long. And again, once I got warm, it was fine. But then after that, I'd have to do a lot of rehab, a lot of icing, and still the next day, like even with rest, the next day it was not the way it was supposed to. And not even just the next day. I could rest for a week, 2 weeks, and my Achilles would still be super tender, super tight. I remember being very concerned that I was going to snap at some point. And that was just one of the signs of chronic inflammation, pointing towards something bigger that I ignored. And these signs were hard to decipher because, again, as a top athlete, you're kind of used to being sore. You're used to being chronically fatigued. Admittedly, like, the digestion issues were weird. The skin issues were weird. I can, again, remember getting itchy after showers, which I knew was weird. I was like, that's definitely not normal. But some of these things are easily overlooked, especially when you're trying to achieve big goals. Hindsight is 2020. Obviously, these were signs towards inflammation, a breakdown in my gut lining, some leaky gut issues, and ultimately ulcerative colitis. I'm sharing this story to scare you a little bit, but also so that you can learn from my journey and my mistakes. What is inflammation? What does inflammation do in the body? Inflammation is a natural response of the immune system to injury or infection. When the body experiences injury or infection, the immune cells are sent to the affected area to protect against harmful substances. The increase in blood flow brings immune cells and nutrients to the area to help repair damaged tissues and remove damaged cells and debris. So inflammation is the signal that we need help over here. There's been some injury, there's been some repair. Not only are we going to bring blood flow through blood vessel dilation, but we're also going to remove damaged or infected cells. So that's all good, right? That's a good part of inflammation. I like the analogy of inflammation being like a fire and our immune cells being like firefighters, where when it's a controlled fire, when it's acute inflammation, it's not a big deal. You're working towards preventing like the larger fires. However, when it's chronic and these fires become big, it overwhelms our firefighters, it overwhelms our immune system, and there's not much we can do about it. Well, there's some stuff we can do about it. We'll go over it later, actually. So chronic versus acute inflammation. It is important to note that while inflammation is a necessary and beneficial process, inflammation can be harmful to the body whenever it becomes chronic. Chronic inflammation is a prolonged and persistent state of inflammation that can lead to a number of health problems such as heart disease, cancer, and autoimmune disorder. Acute inflammation is when there's tissue damage due to trauma, microbial invasion, or toxic compounds. Acute inflammation is characterized by redness, swelling, heat, pain, and limited mobility. It starts rapidly, becomes severe in a short amount of time, and symptoms may last a few days to a few weeks. Chronic inflammation is slow and long-term inflammation, long-lasting, prolonging for periods of several months to years. Generally, the effects and extent of chronic inflammation can vary with cause of injury and ability of the body's to repair and overcome the damage. That's all good to know, but what causes inflammation? Inflammation can be a cause of physical injury that includes cuts, burns, broken bones, bacterial or viral infection. Inflammation can be caused by disorders within the immune system, such as autoimmune disorders in which the immune system attacks healthy cells and tissues. Inflammation can also be a result of exposure to irritants. And we know certain food and beverages can cause inflammation, such as processed foods, refined sugars, and alcohol. Chronic inflammation can manifest itself in a number of ways, including persistent fatigue, muscle aches and weakness, joint pain and stiffness, frequent fevers, difficulty concentrating or remembering things, skin changes such as rash or acne, loss of appetite and weight loss, abdominal pain, and bloating. So before I knew my inflammation was chronic, of this list, I definitely had persistent fatigue, muscle ache and weakness, joint pain and stiffness. I attributed kind of all of these to my efforts as an athlete. I did have skin changes, as I mentioned before, a loss of appetite and abdominal pain, which definitely I knew was weird, and I did not attribute to my pursuit as an athlete. The only thing that I didn't have on this list is frequent fevers, so I was batting a pretty good average of as far as signs that I was chronically inflamed. The good. When is inflammation good? Inflammation is going to help protect the body from harmful substances such as bacteria or toxins by isolating and destroying them. Inflammation is going to help repair damaged tissue. Inflammation is going to also help remove damaged cells and stimulate the immune system. And we're probably more familiar with the fact that inflammation doesn't always help the body. In some cases, it creates autoimmune disease in which the body fights against its own cells by mistake. Some of these autoimmune diseases include RA, rheumatoid arthritis, in which your body attacks its own joints, psoriasis, a chronic skin disease, and of course, inflammatory bowel diseases such as Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Oftentimes, the diseases associated with chronic inflammation can last years and even a lifetime. Maybe you don't have any of these autoimmune diseases. Chronic inflammation can still lead to heart disease, cancer, and other health problems such as obesity, diabetes, and Alzheimer's disease. We'll take a look at what factors might cause chronic inflammation. Of course, genetics is going to play a part. Some people are going to be more prone to having chronic inflammation just based off of their genes. We also know diet can influence the amount of inflammation in our body, and if you eat a diet high in processed foods, refined sugars, or unhealthy fats, that is going to contribute to chronic inflammation as well. Lifestyle choices such as smoking, excessive alcohol consumption, lack of exercise are also going to contribute to chronic inflammation. Exposure to toxins and pollutants are going to help contribute to chronic inflammation. An interesting side note about toxins and stuff, we had someone come to when I worked in the lab, we had someone come into work and give a talk about how harmful actually like incense and candles can be in creating chronic inflammation and generating all kind of cancer. So I thought that was a cool topic, not cool in the sense of like that you can get cancer from those things, but like just good to know. Chronic stress has been linked to chronic inflammation. And I think maybe the obvious thing is infections such as gum disease or H. pylori infection, a bacterial infection are going to contribute to chronic inflammation as well. So there are several steps you can take to battle chronic inflammation. That's going to include eating a healthy diet. This is going to be a diet rich in fruits, veggies, whole grains, and healthy fats such as avocado oil or olive oil, as well as avoiding processed foods, refined sugars, unhealthy fats such as saturated and trans fats. Another tip to battling chronic inflammation is going to be to exercise regularly. You're going to want to aim for 150 minutes of moderate to intense exercise such as brisk walking, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity exercise such as high intensity interval training each week. You're going to want to try to get enough sleep to stage off chronic inflammation. That includes getting about 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Of course, you're going to want to manage stress to avoid chronic inflammation. And you can try to manage stress through relaxation techniques such as deep breathing or meditation, or by seeking love and support from family members and friends, possibly getting a pet. I know there's nothing like a hard workout, a hard cardio session that's going to reduce my stress levels. The things that would normally, stress me out, put me over the top, do not do anything whenever I've worked out hard in the morning. You want to avoid tobacco and excess alcohol consumption to avoid chronic inflammation. Smoking and excess alcohol consumption have been linked to chronic inflammation, so it's important to avoid these habits. You want to avoid triggers that cause inflammation, such as certain medications. An interesting note about the medication part too is that as a part of my journey as an athlete, I had dealt with injuries, specifically like hamstring injuries, in which you want to try to control the inflammation, right? You want to bring down inflammation as quick as possible. So I was prescribed some non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, just Advil, ibuprofen, every 6 to 8 hours, 800 milligrams, which is a lot. but you want to attack that inflammation right away and not let it get under control. What I didn't know about these non-steroidal and anti-inflammatories, this ibuprofen, is that especially when it's taken on an empty stomach, it eats away at your gut lining. It creates leaky gut issues, especially when you've been on them a long time, which I've dealt with my fair share of injuries, especially in college, and I was no stranger to these medications, and to deny the fact that that played a role in ulcerative colitis is silly. So I have to contribute some of those taking those medications, to developing ulcerative colitis. So if you're out there and you're a fan of Advil and everything, it's not a horrible thing, but just note that you probably want to take it with the food and that you don't want to consume it often and frequent. You can try out some anti-inflammatory supplements in order to avoid chronic inflammation in the gut. Supplements such as turmeric and ginger. I wish I knew about turmeric and ginger back then. I would incorporate it into my regimen, but that's okay. I know about it now and I incorporate it into my regimen now. It's worth noting that this inflammation is going to be variable person to person. It's going to require some tweaking and everything that I discussed that you find elsewhere on the internet is not always going to work for you. So it's important to remember that you just have to keep trying, and eventually you'll find the systems that work for you. You'll notice big differences, and definitely if you notice that you're chronically inflamed and you can't do much about it, go ahead and seek some professional help.